Toxic metaframing. That's a term I coined. That's a neologism where you coin a term because it makes understanding it much easier. It's a tool used by toxic people, by narcissists. And it's really easy to uncover once you understand it. I'm going to make a masterclass right now here out of this. And it's not easy to understand completely. It's easy to understand it quickly, but not to understand it completely in one session. But I'll try to give it a masterclass in the sense like if you watch it again, you will understand it better and better and better and better and better. Now, in order to understand toxic metaframing, you have to understand the human behavior in a very basic way. Okay, so there's 3 fundamental energies in a human being, which is the beingness itself, which is unrelated to, it has to do with spiritual awakening to realize that, which is unrelated to the human body and to the human experience. Then you have survival and procreation, just like any other organism. You're trying to survive and procreate. And here comes something super interesting. So, almost everybody on Earth who's not spiritually awakened, which is pretty much everyone, is only within survival and procreation. So within the first 3 chakras. They're stuck in the first 3 chakras. And they never come to higher consciousness, higher awareness, unless it's in their soul plan. And so the thing is that this is super important. Like, you have to understand the basics in order then to understand the rest of it perfectly. So when we are super young, the sacral chakra, which is the second chakra, is about joy. So you see that when children are playing, right? But in effect, this energy also then creates the playing around with other, humans. So you play around, sorry. It's very early in the morning. So you play around with other humans, but it actually is preparing you already for sexual hierarchy. It's like when you see pups playing, they're not just growing up, they're literally also fighting. They're preparing themselves for sexual hierarchy also. And then when the testosterone shoots up, say in boys around 14, 15, or estrogen or other kind of, hormones, then the energy starts to separate in the sacral chakra, and it doesn't be just joy, but it becomes also sexuality. So the sexual desire, organs, hormones develop more and more. So then we enter sexual hierarchy. So basically you are trying to mate while and trying to compete against others that are also trying to mate. So that's your genetic program kind of activating. And then what happens is that when the joy and the sexuality, so the sacral chakra, so I call this libido empowerment, libido suppression, again 2 neologisms, 2 terms I coined, LE. So toxic metaframing is TM. I'm going to call it TM now, toxic metaframing. Libido empowerment is LE, and libido suppression is LS. Okay? So LE, libido empowerment, is when you feel joy and sexuality in your life, and you're really enjoying it, and everything is fine. So you have your joy, you have your sexuality, or you have both, and you are having a blast. You're loving life, okay? And everything feels fulfilled, it feels joyous, everything is fine. So, when you feel that way, you don't usually deal with other people unless you are not aware of the mechanics and you start to fall into ups and downs with other people. You usually are like, hey, this is good, I'm fine, I don't care what other people are doing. Until they kind of try to block your joy or something. So then you deal with others. But here comes the thing. So libido suppression happens when people are not following their joy, when they're not living their joy, when they're not living their sexuality. And what happens is that they become libido suppressed, LS. And so, for example, their job, they hate their job, they hate what they're doing in the evening and so forth. They don't like their partner, whatever. They don't have one, whatever. And so if the LS is there and the person is unconscious, there's always the unconsciousness element to it. Then what they do is, instead of blaming themselves for their misery, they blame other people, mostly the people right next to them, because it's very easy. But they might blame anyone that they meet. And here comes in toxic metaframing. Because they're blaming others, they indirectly, passive aggressively, or overtly, in whichever way, try to push the other person down. Because there's nothing worse than a joyous person who is responsible for your misery. So in a partnership, say, the person might say to you, so you have a very joyous partner and you're yourself unconscious and you're in your misery. Then let's say you want to come into your joy, right? And you want to do something else, and you are making your partner responsible for that. Then you will try to put them down, and you will say, for example, you always do it like your mother, you always do it like your father. It will be an overgeneralization usually, or you're stupid, or everything you do is wrong, can you never do anything right? Those kind of overgeneralizations are usually one sentence or packed in several sentences if it's harsh, really harsh, and they're trying to suppress you down. So that's the toxic metaframe. They're trying to suppress you down. It's a toxic metaframe. It's a big metaframe putting it over you, trying to push you down. And if you're very sensitive to it, you feel it in your body. Like you're feeling the toxic metaframe. And I've come so far that I already notice it without having to listen it, because the energy is so clear. So, and there's 4 types of toxic metaframes: direct, indirect, verbal, non-verbal. For example, if somebody gaslights you, not gaslighting, it's also part of toxicity, but we go to that later. If somebody, for example, ghosts you, that's a toxic metaframe. If there's literally zero reason to ghost you and they ghost you, that's a toxic metaframe. That's a non-verbal, indirect toxic metaframe. Or somebody looks at you like, that's a non-verbal, direct metaframe. Toxic metaframe. TM. And what actually is happening is, it has nothing to do with you. It's literally that they're very unhappy in themselves. And now get this, 90% of people in society are toxic nowadays. They're narcissists, basically. Because this toxic metaframing is the main tool of narcissists. When you uncover it, when you understand it, you see the narcissist within a minute. Because in order to not do it, you have to be very conscious. You have to be a very conscious person. Plus, we're going to talk about push and pull and gaslighting, and we're going to talk about the bait and attack. The bait and attack is basically, it happens a lot in comments when somebody tries to be very logical with you, but in the end they insult you anyway. So they'll be like, well, statistically, or logically, you have to see it's like this, blah 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 blah. Usually they also text a lot because they try to reel you in, and then either they're waiting for it for you to respond. They'll be like, well, I think that you're not right here, and then they'll see just creep or dumbass or something, because they were trying to reel you in and then attack with the toxic metaframe. But usually what's interesting is if you're really good in spotting toxic metaframes, you already see it within the first kind of try to reel you in. It's very, very, very interesting. And you see, one thing that you've to understand is you cannot deal with these people. You cannot deal with narcissists with these toxic metaframings. And the reason is because they are experts. They're experts in the I just remember the situation, which I'm going to explain to you here as well, which is really great. So they're experts in using these manipulation tactics, and they're so good that it's like as if you started a new sport and you were trying to play professional already. You have absolutely no chance against them. They've been learning it since the childhood. So do not try to engage with the narcissist. And by the way, the best way for the narcissist to grow is by completely avoiding them physically. And now I'm gonna, in order to get it out of my head, I'm gonna explain that I actually did a toxic metaframe not long ago, unintentionally. I was super unconscious at that point, and I met a girl on the street, and we then went for a date, and I was super unhappy that day, but it wasn't her fault. I actually thought that it was her fault because I misunderstood a different situation, and I thought I got toxic metaframed by her. In a way I did, which I'm going to explain. In a way I actually did get toxic metaframed by her a bit, but it wasn't deliberate on her part. And then, but I was in such a bad mood that I kind of made her responsible for my bad mood. And the thing is, like, it's not a problem if you recognize it within yourself, but you have to become super conscious, and the first thing is you have to apologize. And the best way to return it is first apologize, recognize what you've been doing, and then give them a genuine short compliment, because compliments are the opposite of toxic metaframes. By the way, good relationships are defined by compliments and appreciation. Toxic relationships are defined by toxic metaframes. You will notice it when you watch it within your own field and with others. It literally changes your perspective on the whole human dynamic in relationships. It's literally the most powerful tool you can ever learn in relationships. So let's recap what I've said so far so it doesn't get too confusing. So you have three energies: consciousness, survival and procreation. If you feel really bad and unconscious, you tend to make other people responsible for it. You try to put them down using a toxic metaframe. You will never amount to anything. You suck. You're dumb. Whatever. Could be all kinds of things that are suppressing as a toxic metaframe. And then here comes the interesting thing. And you cannot deal with the narcissist. The opposite is compliments. Now, there's a whole bunch to unpack here still, and it's very early, but I want to do this right now, so we'll get to it. So just be patient. Let me explain everything. It literally, like, I've changed so many people's lives just explaining toxic metaframing, how it works. It's literally such a game changer. And by the way, one thing that I really want to say here, because I've noticed this on Instagram, but I've noticed this pretty much everywhere, is women are just as much toxic as men, because it has to do with conscious, unconscious, not with male or female. But by the way, a good relationship is where both people are so conscious and so self-reflecting that they can discuss these things, but they must be both open. For example, my ex-girlfriend, she wasn't really open to this. She tried to understand toxic metaframing, but the truth is that she thought anything is toxic metaframing if it's bad, which is not true. For example, I said, if you generalize a whole country or a whole, group, for example, if I say I don't like Germans so much, that's not a toxic metaframe, even if you say it to a German, unless it's meant to put the other person down. And you have to understand the difference. So generalizations towards a whole group or somebody who's not physically present are not toxic metaframes. A toxic metaframe is a direct person-to-person tool by the narcissist to manipulate and control and to put the other person down that they have to do with. So if I talk to you directly, person to person, or I message you DM, or I comment under your video, that's a toxic metaframe. If it's directly towards you, but then it can be a toxic metaframe. But it's not if I say, I don't like India or something. That's not a toxic metaframe. So that's super important. And my ex-girlfriend thought it's both the same. It's not. Because one is meant as a narcissistic tool towards directed towards a person. The other is just a general statement, like maybe a misguided or well-guided observation. It doesn't matter, but it's not a toxic metaframe. It doesn't have to come out of this kind of like, oh, I have such a bad day that that I need to put down a whole nation or something. Like, no, that's not a toxic metaframe. So that's super important to recognize. So it's usually directly within people, within families, relationships, workplace, or somebody you meet on the street, whatever. I remember, for example, I give you a very, very, very simple toxic metaframe. Is there was a woman in waiting at the post office, and it was during COVID time. It was a long line, and I came there and I said, "Are you waiting already for a long time?" And the woman, instead of responding, looked at me like, and then she decided whether she wants to respond or not. That was actually a toxic metaframe. It was a non-verbal, direct toxic metaframe. And I don't think she responded at the end. And she was like, she thought of herself as more important. It was a sexual hierarchy. She wasn't feeling good, and she was blaming. She was looking for a victim at that point. So, and then here comes the next point: perpetrator-victim dynamic. Okay, the perpetrator is always the perpetrator, in the sense like, if I say you're dumb and the other person says no, you're dumber, the victim actually is responding to the perpetrator. So the victim is never the perpetrator, by the way. They might end up in codependency, sure, but they're not the perpetrator. Because what the narcissist does, oh my god, there's so much to unpack, all of these things. So the perpetrator says you're dumb. The victim says you're dumber. That's over toxic metaframing, basically. You're kind of like trying, no, you're dumb, no, you're dumber, you're much dumber. That's what like kids do, right? But adults do the same thing. And so what happens is, if you say you are dumb, and the victim responds as no, you're dumber, then the narcissist, the toxic metaframe, is an expert in countering. So they will say like, see how you react, you have to go to the psychiatrist. So do you know what I mean? So they know so well how to deal with you that you as a victim, you will even feel as the perpetrator. That's the gaslighting. And then also they do push-pull. So they'd be like, they do the bait, like I said before, but they also do the push-pull. So they'd be like, you're the victim, and they'd be like, you suck, and then when they see that they went too far, and you're instead of like fighting them, you like pulling back, then they'll be like, oh, I didn't mean it like that. Oh, I love you so much. And then or they become really funny, and you come close to them again, because you're like, oh, you're so funny, and that's then the codependency starts, which I call the asymmetric chakra relationship. Basically, is you love them, but they're not loving you. They're just using you, right? They're never really loving you. They're just using the solar plexus in order to control you. Yeah, the symmetric asymmetric relationships in chakra, they're very hard to it would be maybe too much to unpack right now, but I'll just do it shortly. The healthy relationship is chakra to chakra, so sacral chakra to sacral chakra, sexual attraction; heart chakra to heart chakra, love; third eye to third eye chakra, which is spiritual growth. Those are the three type of relationships. And then there are the asymmetric ones. Oh, I need money. The other person has a strong root chakra, I have a low root chakra, they control me, but I love them. It goes like sideways, like diagonal in, these kind of like, so just be mindful of that you have these symmetric and asymmetric relationships. And asymmetric relationships, if they stick together, that's codependency. That's basically what people define as codependency. So instead of seeing relationships in from that perspective, from the previous traditional perspective, like, oh, we're just together, try to see them from soul plan, soul mission. Do we have the same soul plan, soul mission? Do we have chakra attraction? What type of chakra attraction do we have? Is it symmetric, asymmetric? And in a very conscious relationship, you can talk about these things, right? So toxic metaframing is the primary tool of the narcissist. And now comes the most important part. The only way to deal with a narcissist is completely avoid them. Completely. And you cannot deal with them in a constructive fashion, except if they're super conscious. Then you can explain to them with toxic metaframing what they're doing, why they're doing it. And now I'll give you a tool for fixing relationships that are toxic. Both sit down and for themselves, and they write down a list of what gives them joy and what gives them sexuality. Both are separated. So they do that on their own. You do that for yourself, and they do that for themselves. They write like a list, okay? And then you come together, and you have to be very honest and open about your wishes and desires and joy and sexuality, and learn to live from the now, in the sense like, what is it that would give you now more joy and more sexuality? And then you come together and you find the common ground, the things that you can do together, the things that you can talk about together, and then also discuss the points where you have a little bit of trouble. For example, the partner, it's an extreme situation, but the partner might say, I want to experience sexually other people, or I want to do something that I enjoy which you hate. Then you have to discuss how you're able to let the other person experience partially what they want or fully what they want or whatever. The thing is, like, if you block them from their joy and their sexuality, and or doesn't have to be, and you as well do that for yourself, then it's very hard to come together. You kind of have to allow joy and sexuality, joy or sexuality, in order for a healthy partnership to work. That's also the reason why some couples really like their separate time and still are good partners together. But the problem begins when one person does something without the other person knowing. And so they're following their joint sexuality, for example, by cheating, right? But because it's hidden, it will make it super easy for the other person to get even more pissier. So, and they sense it, of course. So, but if you come together and write it down and put it on paper, and then also learn to use genuine short compliments, authentic compliments, at least once or twice a day, instead of toxic metaframing, and you will see that the relationship turns around immediately. But for that, both have to be super conscious. If one is narcissist and doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to, then the relationship is basically over. So, but again, toxic metaframing is not just within romantic relationship. It's in families, it's in jobs, it's people on the street, it's everywhere. And you see it a lot online. Because people see your video and then they toxic metaframe you directly. And what I noticed on Instagram is just as much as on YouTube, everywhere, because people are unhappy, and they're getting more and more unhappy in the world that we're living in. Work is more stress, money stress, people stress. It's a cycle. People piss on themselves and they piss on others and so forth. It's very hard to break the cycle. So basically you have to if you want to have a very harmonious, and then we come to also another super important point, you have to love yourself. And self-love means to follow your highest harmony. What gives me the highest harmony? If people that attack you online constantly don't give you highest harmony, why are you doing it? So you have to monitor everything that you do and check what's your highest harmony at any given moment in time, and you have to follow that, and that's your self-love. And the more you are in self-love, the easier, and the more you practice it, the more you're disciplined about it, the easier it is to remove yourself from toxic codependency, toxic metaframers, narcissists, from these type of relationships, because you're learning to effectively choose yourself instead of the other person. And many people make the mistake of choosing the other person. Many people make the mistake of choosing the other person before themselves in in harmony, and thereby they're actually self-hating because they're constantly choosing an energy field which is not their highest harmony. And this Polish girl which I met, which I accidentally toxic metaframed, and it was an indirect nonverbal, because I was doing like this, and but I was really pissy that day. It had not that much to do with her. It started already early in the morning. It was full moon. I was groggy, hangry, everything. And if she had told me, hey, you are toxic metaframing, maybe you're not following your highest joy, what would give you more joy and harmony right now, then I would have said, oh, you're right, okay, I'm sorry, but I wasn't in that thing. And then, but she did one thing. She asked me, what do you want right now? And I said, I want a real date, like, because she said it's not a date. So, but anyway, so that's funny, because like the last 10 years I don't remember acting like responding like that, but I guess it's because I've been very, very tired that day. And that's another thing, like, you can become unconscious of your behavior by just being very, very tired physically. Like, I mean, don't eat anything and be really tired, and you see how quickly pissy you get. So that's why it's so important to look at your highest harmony. What is your highest harmony? Do you need to sleep, and so forth? And I remember even before the date, we waited like in a cold wind. I was like, I want to go to bed. And my friend also said I would also want to just go to bed. So it wasn't the best. So, but by the way, here's a funny thing. She blocked me in the end. And I have to agree with her. Like, from the way it went, it was the correct decision to block me. That's very funny. Although I think we would have been a good match, it was just a bad day. It was correct, but from her to block me, because if she wasn't probably aware of toxic metaframing and narcissistic tools, but probably she felt it in a way, so she thought, um, it's too dangerous. He might be a narcissist, and it might have triggered her something that she experienced in a real narcissistic relationship. And she wasn't aware that I'm super aware of what's going on, so she thought, that's just going to repeat. That's the reason why someone blocks you, because they assume that something just repeats and they don't take you for full. So that's the reason they block you, because they don't feel that you're conscious enough to supersede and go into a different type of relationship. But they might just, because it triggers some kind of trauma within them from the past. In this case, she was not necessarily in the wrong, but she made, I think, a bad decision, in the sense, like, because she wasn't aware that I'm super conscious, that I can actually supersede my own negative behavior. And that's the thing. In relationships, you have to understand that if it's a very conscious relationship, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to, let's say you wake up in the morning and you're like, you have to go to where you're like, you might throw out the toxic metaframe accidentally. But the trick is immediately apologize, or the other partner makes you aware of it, become super conscious, give out a compliment, hug, and then just be like, I didn't mean it. I just have to follow my highest joy right now, and then just do at that moment what gives you whatever highest harmony, highest joy at that moment in time, and recognize that you've projected your physical state or mental state onto the other person. And then the relationship will become more harmonious. I remember my ex-girlfriend toxic metaframed me in a situation, and I was like, hey, stop. I said, what would give you highest joy, highest harmony right now? And then she kind of like changed a little bit, did her thing, and then it all calmed down again. But the interesting thing is, she didn't want to see that she toxic metaframed me, and that was kind of slowly coming for me to the end of the relationship, because if you are not conscious enough to recognize that you're actually toxic metaframing, then she told me, why are you so fidgety? Why are you so nervous? I was doing something, was unrelated to her, and why can't you do it more relaxed? And I said, hey, that's a toxic metaframe, because it's your energy that's problematic right now, not mine. And so basically, toxic metaframing can be super simple sentences. It can be packaged. Usually it's like an energy which is the other person is in bad mood, or in their misery. It can be long-term or short-term misery, by the way. They can be long-term suppressed, long-term libido suppressed, long-term. By the way, when I mean libido suppressed, I mean the sacral chakra, the origin of joy and sexuality. And or because you can be super in joy, and look at yourself. Like, when you're super enjoying your life, you're in highest harmony, you are doing your thing, do you bother so much about other people? No, not at all. By the way, the sexual hierarchy, to give you an example, it's like, if there's so much to unpack still behind it, because we also have to talk about ego, about personhood, about recognizing that you're not the person, recognizing you're not the body, not the thoughts, and like the spiritual awakening part, because that allows you to really then uncover also more things behind it. For example, let's say you have a Ferrari, you buy a Ferrari, and you buy the Ferrari because you're trying to survive and procreate better, okay? And then another person touches your Ferrari, and you're like, hey, you asshole, don't touch my Ferrari. It's actually a mixture of identification with ego and personhood, and the fear of not surviving and not procreating. That's all that's like hidden behind it in a very overdriven, overclocked way. And that's what people then call ego. The strong ego is basically someone who's fearful of surviving, procreating, and they're trying to push it all the time. That's what people call ego. It's like that drive in an overclocked, overdriven way. Like, and that's also then it intertwines with toxic metaframing if the person is unhappy and so forth. So how does the conscious person deal with a difficult state? It's very simple. Just follow your highest harmony and highest joy in every moment in time, because to have joy, to feel joy, it's not really complicated. It's like if you close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out, and be like, what is my highest harmony right now? What is my highest joy? What do I want to sleep a little bit more? Do I want to have, I don't know, drink tea or something? Go for a walk, do some yoga. But a lot of people do things which are not in their highest harmony state, but they think it is. For example, oh, I want to smoke a cigarette. That's not actually a highest harmony state. I want to have a glass of wine. That's not a highest harmony state. I want to take drugs. I want to, go party. Those are often not highest harmony states. Those are excitement states, or substance states, or things to avoid something else, or just out of bad education, misguided ways to experience things. But if you really, really go into kind of like a calm state and look, what's my highest harmony, you will find out it's actually different things. Because for a lot of people, for example, smoking is a coping mechanism to not look at underlying issues. Drinking is the same. Hanging around with people that are not really harmonious, or really loud music is also not. So you have to really become super aware and sensitive to your highest harmony state, and then you fall automatically into self-love, and then you stop with toxic metaframing, basically, or you're beginning to stop with it. But the people who are watching this are usually more the victims, and for the victim to understand this, there's only 3 ways to deal with a narcissist. Make them aware of what they're doing, but then they usually become aggressive. They can become super aggressive because you just unpack them, what's behind it. Over toxic metaframe them, you're stupider, or just leave them completely. And the last option, leave them completely, is the best option. So just be super aware of that. And if you're not able to do that, it's because you haven't practiced enough self-harmony, self-love. You're still in the codependency, and you have to start with the self-love. Treat yourself well. Give yourself highest harmony. What I do, for example, from time to time, I book a massage, wellness, go for a walk, enjoy, meditation, whatever. You have to learn that. Because if you're not used to it, because you haven't learned it from childhood, then you have to learn. You have to have discipline for your own higher self. And if you're HSP like me, highly sensitive person, then it's even more important. But it's important for everyone. And then and the interesting thing is, even parents to children toxic metaframe, but the children have no They cannot get away from the toxic metaframer. That's the worst. And children also toxic metaframe the parents. You have to become conscious of what you're doing. So I think that for now it wraps it up. If you have questions, put it in the comments. If you have, one of the good things is a lot of people have a aha moment where they're like an epiphany or a revelation where they're like, wow, that's toxic metaframing. I'm understanding it now. Wow, you give it a term. Now I can spot it everywhere. That's actually a very good sign. And then just put in the comments like your experience if you want. Because other people then will see, okay, that's what toxic metaframing is. Okay, this experience. And there's a lot of people who then start to understand it. Like, and it creates a certain feeling inside of your body, and you've always known this feeling, but now you can give it a name, and now you understand where it comes from. And it's just such a powerful tool. And I'm telling you, for men as well as for women, there's so many toxic metaframers and narcissists out there. Literally, like, I think with internet and everything, it became even worse. And because so many people are unhappy, they're blaming everyone else. I see it under my videos, which is interesting because some of the videos that I made are very well intentioned, but people, because they're so in such a bad state, they actually try to toxic metaframe me. And the thing is, I can't even respond, because the moment I respond, I would get banned, because they would see like, oh my god, you have to be super nice to everyone online because you can lose your account so quickly. So as a creator, I mean, the person who comments doesn't give a but you as a creator, you have to be very careful. So you cannot go into fighting mode, and that would be over toxic metaframing. Makes no sense. Plus the thing is, like, after a while, to be quite honest, if you practice a lot of self-harmony, and after a while you spot them, even if you respond to them, especially online where you don't feel their energy field so strongly, it has less and less influence over you, over your energetic field, because you've learned to self-harmony, to self-love, highest harmony, self-love. So it has less and less impact on you. And the thing is also, you can fall into a I don't feel so good thing very, very quickly if everybody acts bad towards you, and you just have a bad day. Then it's really easy to fall into toxic metaframing. Like it happened to me with the Polish girl. I had so many like unproductive experiences, I would say, you could say, in the last time, and then I had this really bad day that I just misunderstood a certain situation, and I thought that I'm actually being toxic metaframed when I wasn't. And yeah, that was interesting. And I was in a situation. The thing is also, certain situations you cannot take yourself out of. You can, but it seems like you can. For example, outside it was super cold, and inside we were in a restaurant which was super fucking loud. And even the restaurant owner, I talked to him later on a different day, he told me, yeah, that's a huge problem in the restaurant, the loud noise. And I was just overwhelmed. And outside it was really fucking cold wind. It was a really shitty day. It was full moon. And as a Cancer, I respond a lot to full moon. And then I was like, I don't want to go outside. I don't want to be inside. I want to be on this date. I want to meet the girl. But there's like no alternative right now. I don't have an apartment here or a house. You have to book a hotel or something. So it was kind of like everything was shitty. Because otherwise I would have said, hey guys, what I need to do is in a lot of situations I'm complacent where I don't have to be, but I mean they were Polish girls, so they want to have fun. I get it, because Polish people, I know them, they just want to have a lot of fun. But I would be at that point. I was like, hey, let's just book a wellness hotel, guys. What do you think about it? Let's just go. Let's get your, I don't know. Let's go for 5 star. Let's book a 5 star hotel. Let's do some wellness sauna and let's just chill. And what I often don't do, I mean, it's for a lot of people it would be overkill, I guess. But what I often don't do, I just aguantar. I go with the situation much longer than I should, if even if it doesn't give me higher harmony. I noticed this also in other situations where, like, instead of like really pushing extra energy and changing my situation, I'd be like, oh, maybe tomorrow's better, and that then pushes me into a situation which more and more is then disharmonious for me until I feel so uncomfortable that I finally do the push. Um, this is an interesting phenomenon to recognize that sometimes you have to exert a little bit of effort to go into a higher harmony state, like because you just want to be late. Let's say for example somebody does loud music around you, and you're always hoping that it stops, but it doesn't stop and it just continues. You have to at some point exert effort and be like, no, now I'm changing, now I'm going somewhere else. And that's kind of like the lazy man's way to higher self harmony. Yeah, that's an important observation as well. And I think if I had been like, hey guys, this is way too loud for me, I'm not in a good mood, I'm just, let's just book a hotel. But the other thing is, like, then to do the hotel thing or whatever, wellness hotel, whatever thing, spa, is also a difficult it's also a difficult situation because it puts you then into other stress mode again, because you have to organize things and so forth. So it was just a bad day. And the conscious person can talk about it openly and then also forgive the other. Both can forgive each other and move to a higher state of frequency, a higher vibration. In that case, she wasn't able to do it. I actually even apologized, and but she wasn't able to move into a higher state. And that's something that is super important when you pick partners. You must be sure that they're open to moving into a higher state. And if they're not seeing what a toxic metaframe is, they basically want to stay a narcissist. Let's keep it simple. They want to stay a narcissist. They don't want to move. They can't. Also, there's something super important. Last thing is, everybody has like a spiritual battery, which can get charged to a certain level. And a lot of people don't have much charging space left, so it's not like they can really grow. And that has to do with the soul. So if the soul is not ready to grow, then the relationship won't happen. I was even thinking about this, like, why do I have such a problem finding a relationship? And I think with a woman, and I think I think I have an answer for that. Number one is, I don't necessarily need a woman to grow spiritually. So I don't need a relationship to grow spiritually because I've already made a lot of progress. Like a lot of progress. The second thing is, a toxic person doesn't dock onto me anymore. She can't, because I don't accept it anymore. And the third thing is, probably also the other person doesn't have the capacity to grow so much, because if they had, then the relationship with me would be ideal, because with spiritual awakening, with understanding toxic metaframing and so forth, she would grow very, 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 very quickly. And also having been a tantra master for over 1,000 women, sessions that I did is like there's so much to grow and to unpack if you're together with me. And I think for most women, they want to be stuck in this superficial, like, I just want a handsome guy. I don't want to grow spiritually. That's just too much for me. It's not in their soul plan. It's not in their soul mission. And so that's, I think, is the real metaphysical reason behind it, because otherwise women would feel tremendously attracted to me and be like, this is a partner I can grow with, like on a spiritual level. And but they're basically just, they just want to live in their codependent trauma a lot of times. So that's why they look for toxic men, in order to relive their pain, in order for it to be looped into infinity until they grow from it. You have to understand these things from a metaphysical point of view, to understand why. Because I have the ability to see patterns, and 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 my ability to see patterns allows me to see that soul plans and soul missions really do exist, and that we literally, the karma and all of the stuff literally exists, and that we pick our partners, and we pick people, and we pick everything in order to grow from that. And if there's no soul mission, soul plan to have a crazy growth spiritually, then that partnership just won't happen. So that's that.